All righty, welcome everybody. Happy to have all y'all here. Looks like we've got pretty good number of you guys logged in. This is great. So welcome athletes, parents, and coaches to another edition of hashtag FFT Live presented by Fitter and Faster Swim Camps. My name's Tyler Clary, and I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing here at Fitter and Faster. I hope everybody's been enjoying our live series so far. Let us know in chat where you're from and what swim team you're representing. If at any point the chat begins to get overwhelming, there's a red button that will minimize the chat window, but in just a couple of minutes, we're actually going to be deactivating the chat. So just be ready for that. We will open up chat at the very end of our webinar to let people talk to us and ask questions, but we really want to pay attention to our wonderful presenters who have volunteered their time to be with us today. So that being said, I want to introduce, we're going to do things a little bit differently. I want to introduce our founder and CEO of Fitter and Faster Tour, David Arluck, who's going to be kind of guiding us through this conversation. David, are you there?
I am here.
Good to see you, man. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm doing good. Thank you for having me. I'm excited. I'm nervous too, but I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Okay. Good. Glad to have you here. And we've got a ton of people here. This is great. Shout out to everybody that's joined us. Caleb Austin, Vanessa Alvarado, Wade Heggie. You know, it's where Todd Schmitz is here. Awesome. Stoked to have you guys here. So David, do you want to talk to us a little bit and introduce us a little bit to the other people that we have on with us today?
Yes. Well, I'd like to introduce myself and talk to you a little bit about what we're going to do today, and then I'll introduce everybody. My name is David Arluck. I am 49 years old. I'm married. My wife and I have 2 kids who are both involved in swimming. My daughter is 4 years old. Up until the start of the pandemic, she was taking swim lessons once a week. And my son is 11. He swims for Nation's Capital in the DC area. And like many of you coaches and parents, my son wasn't able to compete in JOs. He was excited about making it as an 11-year-old and the other season-ending meet that he was looking forward to going best time. So we can definitely relate with each other on that. We live in Maryland, and I'm also the founder of Fitter and Faster Swim Camps. And I'm nervous right now, I got to tell you, because I want to do a good job for you. I want this to be a valuable experience for everyone who's in attendance, and share some experience and ask some questions that everybody's asking. My company, Fitter and Faster, is very similar to your swim teams all around the country. Like many of your teams, we're not generating any revenue right now. We have postponed 80 swim camps for the spring, just as you have all are not able to practice. We have a full-time staff who is working with us through the pandemic and working on new services that we can create for the swimming community. Everybody on our staff is still employed and being paid their full salaries. And we also have 130 contract workers who work with us. And that's very similar to many of your teams around the country who might be of an equal size or even smaller. Our issues are very, very similar. Like you, Fitter and Faster is dependent on facilities being open. We rent about 250 facilities all around the United States annually. We depend on them being open. We depend on them being safe. We're dependent on lane space. And like your practices, we gather in groups. You know, our clinics are a maximum of 36 participants most of the time, and then some clinics are 48 people. So we have a lot of the same questions, and we're working on a lot of the same things. And I want to share with you things that I've learned in talking to many people around the country, and then also obviously ask questions of other very, very smart people involved in the sport. One thing that's important to say is that despite the current situation that we're all in, I'm extremely optimistic about the future. But we have a lot of very serious work to do now. and we have to be successful, and we have realities that we have to face. Over the past 30 days, I've spoken with countless coaches, swim team owners, aquatic directors, swim parents. I have 2 people on staff right now who have personally called every side of the swimming community. I've spoken with my congressman. I have a very good friend who works in infectious diseases, and I've talked to many other people in youth sports and other companies who are in similar situations, and I want to learn how they're handling it so that we as a sport can navigate this together. It's important that we all are successful and ready to go. So I hope to share a bit of what have I learned, and I still have a lot of questions, so I'm looking forward to having those discussions today. And let's get started. So I wanted to introduce you to my guests. Joel Scheinelfield is the Managing Director of Sport Development at USA Swimming. Joel, are you there? Here he comes.
Thanks,
Joel.
David. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for joining us today. It's a privilege to have you here, and thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity.
I appreciate it. And then also, of course, we have Tyler Clary. He's in my upper right-hand window. I don't know where he is for you. He is Director of Marketing for Fitter and Faster. He is an Olympic gold medalist in the 200 backstroke, and really good guy, and he has some good perspective to share. And then, of course, my very good friend, gold medal Melvin Stewart. He is the co-founder of SwimSwam.com. He loves the sport as much as any of us here and has wonderful perspective. And happy to have you here, Mel. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
So Joel, starting with you, as the Managing Director of Sport Development for USA Swimming, what is it in ordinary times? What is it that you do?
Sure. So our department in sport development, as part of USA Swimming, is focused on member service, athletes, coaches, officials, all of our members. So over 400,000 members in those various categories, whether you're a brand new swimmer or somebody who's working their way up towards our national team, we provide services and programs for people at all stages. We have a team services group that goes out and works with teams on the road. They do video review at championship meets so that athletes and coaches can get a chance to look at their races immediately following that. But then also we send folks out to help you work on your LSC governance as well. So we've got an LSC services group as well. So we're sort of an all-encompassing how to serve our membership group.
It's a valuable group, and I know a lot of people on your team, pretty well. Mel, what is it that you do day to day?
What is it I do day to day? I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yes.
At SwimSwam, I'm on the business side and marketing and sales, and I oversee production, but less and less so. And since we've made a new hire in the last 2 years, has taken up a lot of responsibility. Coleman Hodges, I think a lot of people know Coleman. It feels like at SwimSwam, I'm following the mind of swimming. It's as content flows out on our site, I'm seeing how people respond to it, where they're gravitating, and as a lead into this conversation that we're having here, which is we have a big group in the room, but it's also very intimate. We probably all know each other. What's interesting and something that's kind of fascinated me was that as coronavirus rose in everyone's mind, that was over February and into early March. In our news, we put a header on our site just for COVID-19, and that was drawing a lot of traffic and a lot of interest. And then at a certain point, about mid to the third week in March, it really went down. People would check in and see that news, but really they started to follow training news, dry land news, and positive news. So it seemed like the swimming base became very, very forward-looking and they wanted hope. And I hope that we can talk about things that are forward-looking and hopeful today.
That's the plan. And so Joel, how has your job changed over the past 30 days?
Well, the constant is member service, and communication. The difference is sort of the volume and sort of the need to do it right away, and then also moving to virtual. So our goal with our team services group, which is led by Brendan Hansen and Tom Avicius, some of the names you probably know: Mark Hesse, Jay Chambers, Jamie Lewis, Juan Caraveo, Scott Colby. Their goal is to talk to every single club team in the country. So we have over 3,000 club teams in the country. And so that group right now is focused, and Randy Julian is in that group as well. All of those folks are focused on trying to connect with every single club and find out what it is that they need and try to connect them to services. At the same time, Jane Grosser, who works with our LSC services group, is conducting weekly LSC calls, but also daily calls with LSC general chairs and staff to make sure that they understand some of the possibilities of how they can help their clubs. And then also if they're stuck or if they're struggling, we're developing a resource group made up of LSC leaders who feel like they've got a certain strength within a certain area. So whether that's communication with membership, whether that's developing coaches forums on coming up with ideas to keep membership engaged, whether that's actually direct financial support, or business services. We've got a group of people who have volunteered to help LSCs that may not be as well equipped as others to provide those services, essentially trying to multiply our staff across the country. And we've got a lot of people who want to pitch in right now. And so we're trying to take advantage of that goodwill and that sort of spirit of collective family and that moving forward that you talked about earlier, David.
Yeah, it's really important. And, there's a lot of questions. Like I said, over the last 30 days, I've spoken with literally hundreds of influential people in the sport, coaches, swim team owners of all different sizes. And over the past few days in particular, I've spoken with many in preparation for this meeting. And I want to go into each one of the different questions, that might be related to practices, season planning, finances, and things like that. And we will in a few minutes. But before we go into that, one thing that I want to address is successful businesses such as a swim team. They have lots of different parts that work in unison, that work well together. And right now, and for the foreseeable future, it's not business as usual. There's a lot changing, and there's going to be a lot that continues to change. And there's going to be some things that there's going to be a lot of things actually that we have absolutely no control over, right? And then there's going to be things that we do have control over. And I'd like to talk about some of those things. And I also would like to ask you, what do you feel are the attributes of the teams who are going to come out of this pandemic successfully? So Joel, if you don't mind, so it's like the intangibles. And I think that this is very, very important. What are some of the intangibles of the teams who are going to come out of the pandemic with some success?
I think, there's a couple different categories of those programs. You've got some programs that are very part-time, that don't have any assets, and they're able to sort of shut down and then reemerge from this very simply. And so I think they'll survive, with a very easy path, a different looking path, but very easy. The difference is the clubs with assets, the full-time coaches, the actual facilities, as you mentioned, some different business entities, whether that's a swim lesson program, et cetera, are going to have a more difficult time simply because of managing those assets and managing to pay people, right? And manage all of their liabilities that they have financially. But the people who have done a great job of communication and the people who have done a great job of building the value of the experience that their athletes and families have within the program are going to survive this. So if you've done a great job of communication, if you've constantly brought people into your mission and people feel a part of your culture, your path towards surviving and thriving and actually coming out of this on the other side better are far more likely than if you've made some assumptions about people just want to be here because we're good. You know, I mean, if you actually deliberately thought about how to engage people and bring them into your culture, which I think is what the vast majority of our coaches think about every day, you're gonna do well in this environment. You're not gonna do as well as you normally do, and you have to fight through a lot of difficult times. But that engagement with your athletes and families, and making sure that they have a great experience and that they know that you care and that you're working hard to make this this time valuable for them, and you're continuing to connect with them, that's going to be huge. So I think, like you've posted a lot of resources, which we also have on our website. We're carrying some of your resources and some other resources out there. We've built a ton of virtual content so that coaches can engage with their athletes, share that virtual content, and then have discussions and team meetings afterwards. We've got two of our folks who have pivoted completely. They're in our education group led by MJ Truix. Morgan and Sydney on our team have taken full reign of making sure that we're putting up not only our new content, but also content from those outside, so that we are making as much available to our athletes and coaches and teams as possible to keep people engaged during this time.
That's good. That's good. You guys have it. How about you, Mel? What do you think are some of the intangibles of, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur? You know, this climate reminds me a lot of being an entrepreneur and starting a business, you know, because it's not business as usual right now. You got to reinvent yourself. Tell me a little bit also, as an elite level athlete, I'm sure you reinvented yourself a few times. What are some of the attributes you think successful teams are going to have, or teams who successfully come out of the pandemic?
I'll be quick when I talk about SwimSwam, but I'll sum it up here in about 45 seconds. This sounds odd, but during trying times, I get excited because I know that it's going to test your resolve, and I like to meet those tests. It makes me excited. I know that I know that we might lose some folks, but you might lose some teammates, you might lose some partners, but you're going to come out stronger. Internally, we told everyone, look, everyone, no one's being fired, everyone stays on. We're at a wartime footing. You might be working longer days, but we're gonna dig in and work hard. And if you're on a team, or you're on we have protection from the government, and I'm confident that money's coming through. We were early to jump on that, on the payroll protection. Personally, as an athlete, when I think about this time, I think about this time as a gift. I think that we spend so much of our time as athletes for so many, many years with our head down in the pool and so many hours spent practicing. And it seems like 99% of our swimming family we talk about it, but we never dive into what it means to be focused, and what it means to be mindful, and what it means to become great in your head. And there's some things that I did when I swam, which was every night before I went to sleep, I considered it a part of my practice. I would think through my race with a stopwatch and think through every single split. I would imagine every stroke. I would imagine every kick. And I would do that every night before I went to sleep to program my head. And then I did it on purpose so that I would sleep through the night, so my brain would rewire. I'd wake up in the morning, and the next morning I would tell myself my goal times before my feet hit the ground. Then I would walk to my mirror, and I'd read my goals on my mirror. But this mantra, this prayer, this meditation was something that intensified the further I got into my career. And I think this is a time when athletes and coaches can really dig in and focus on this right here, because if this is the time to get your head right.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I've made a list of things, intangible things that I think businesses, and I want to put this out here, guys. I want every single swim team to survive this. It's extremely important. We are a community, we're a small community, and every team is important. Every coach is important, and every team owner and everybody's concerns is important. The reality of it is so, like Mel said, some just aren't going to. Did I freeze?
No, you're still there.
Okay. The reality of it is some may not be successful. And I want to just lay out a few things that are important intangibles, but will help as you guide through the other questions. There are so many other questions that people have related to the sport itself, and performance and financial stuff that we'll get into. But I want to just talk about the business as a whole. One of the things that I think is very, very important is, as a team, you have to establish a mission, a short-term and a long-term mission. You have to have a true north that everybody on your team is aware of and lives by, whether they're on your staff or they're your swim parents. They have to be aware of it, and that's going to help guide all the other decisions that you make going forward as you strive towards success. You're also going to have to plan for a wide variety of scenarios. I've heard so many questions about people asking, what's the CDC going to say? What's USA Swimming going to do? What's LSC going to do? When are my meets going to be? Are the pools going to be open? These are all great questions to ask, but you got to plan for 3-4 different scenarios, perhaps, short-term and long-term. And they aren't all going to be plan A. You know, you may end up going with plan C, but if it ends up being plan C, you got to go with it. And then you may have to shift again. So you have to have a wide variety of scenarios for your finances, your pool availability, and anything else that affects your business. You need to think different about how you're going to achieve what you want to achieve for your athletes. It's not business as usual. It's not the same path. And you need to figure out what your goals are for your athletes, short-term and long-term, and be flexible about that. When it comes to your finances and pool availability and staffing, you have to be really, really flexible and leave no stone unturned. You just got to be dedicated to finding success, not taking no for an answer, and making it work for your team, because you're fighting for your life, a lot of you guys. And I know it. I've talked to a lot of the teams, and I think this is a very, very important thing. And you need to work those things through. I talked about being flexible and open-minded. I also think it's very important that, look, when you have a certain amount of success, it's healthy to have an ego, and it helps. But you know what? There's a big difference between ego drive and letting your ego get in the way. You know, there's going to be a lot of really good people with very good thoughts and opinions, and there's really no time for bickering on boards, on teams, among teams. This is a great time for teams to get together and cooperate. I call it co-opetition. I live in Maryland within the Potomac Valley Swimming. It's probably the smallest, I think it's the smallest LSC in the United States of America. But it's also got the biggest teams, among the biggest teams in the United States of America, with the highest level of performance. And the teams here get along with one another. And I'm sure that there's some bickering here and there every once in a while behind the scenes. Maybe some coaches switch staffs and things like that. But you know what? These guys get along really, really well. And I think they're an excellent model for other LSCs to look at what they're doing. And I think that that's a very, very important thing. Like Joel was saying, having good communication is extraordinarily important, and managing expectations and being honest about where you're at as a team, where you're going to go, and laying things out. And just like successful athletes, and I'm sorry if I'm just going on, there's 3 more. Just like successful athletes, you can't get too high when you have success, but you can't go too low if you don't have any. If you didn't get the loans that you were looking for, if some people leave your team, if people aren't showing up your virtual network, your virtual practices and stuff like that, don't get low about it. Reevaluate and see what you got to do. And the other thing is that I just also really wanted to point out, the last thing I want to point out is that coaches, team owners, boards, you want to be successful, you want your teams to succeed, you're most likely going to work harder now than you ever have in your entire life. That's just going to be a fact. So many coaches work very, very, very hard, long hours. They give up their personal lives. They give up family time. I think one of the harsh realities that you got to deal with right now is that you're going to be working perhaps harder than you ever have. And it might mean in terms of time, it might be in terms of thinking differently. And in terms of recruitment, I actually think that right now is a great time for recruitment for the sport, because other sports can't practice either. So if you've got a good production going on right now as it relates to your strength training and dry land and whatever else that you're doing, and physical fitness and nutrition, you could be bringing in other people to your team so that when you do start back up, you're ready to go. So I think that there are opportunities, and balance is not going to be a 50-50 thing for you. It's a time to work very, very hard. So sorry for, just dominating that. Joel, is there something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about the reaching out and making sure that people know that swim teams are ready and open for business. And so we have a lot of people who are behind the scenes at USA Swimming who do some really cool work in our commercial department. We have a great communications person in Belle McLemore, and we have Shayna Ferguson, who swam at the Naval Academy. And they are building out with their team, building out a really cool marketing kit for both clubs and for LSCs. A local media buy is a far more effective buy than, say, a national media buy in most cases. So working on some ways they can do that, but then also social media templates and physical media templates that the teams can use that are all about, getting back to the pool. So we're really excited about that. They're working very closely with folks in sport development to get our take on how a club would use them, and we'll have some coaches who provide feedback as well. But our goal is to get those in everybody's hands so that as we reopen, we can take advantage of exactly what you're saying. It's a good chance for people to go out and find new members and get a jump start. As we look at kind of building into, rather than a culminating end of summer season, moving into right into a fall. And keep that flowing. We want to develop that feeling of, hey, you're joining the team now, and it's not to just compete in August, because championship meets are that's sort of slipping away and moving towards a splash series of events that moves us towards a really good fall season into the Olympic cycle. So yeah, we want to get people excited about this. We want to get our athletes excited about being back with their coaches. As you said, David, it'll look very different in the beginning. We're talking about having that A, B, C, D plan on how you're going to bring back small groups. You're going to have shorter practices likely to get those small groups through. I talked to a couple of coaches today, are talking about running essentially 10 hours of practice a day to get everybody in small windows. And I think that's a great idea. Get people back in slowly. The other thing is, a lot of our athletes haven't been out of the water this long. So we're not going back to 9 practices or 7 practices a week, or it happens to be. And, people have to ramp up slowly. We need to make sure we prevent, injuries and make sure we get people back in the right place. But then also, as Mel said, there's a huge amount of rejuvenation that's happening right now in terms of people being out of the water. The athletes are going to be, if they've taken care of themselves, and a lot of them are doing dry land with their coaches right now, and they're active with their families because there's really nobody else to hang out with. We need to get them back in swimming shape. It's going to take some time. And actually coming back and doing these maybe shorter practices on different days to get everybody back in, it could be a really interesting way to bring back people in a very healthy way. So as families and athletes look towards coming back, just remember, it's going to be different. It's still going to be great. It's still going to be swimming. It's still going to be fun. It's still going to be hard work, but it is going to look probably in the beginning very differently than it does now. Yeah,
and I want to get into that. I've received literally hundreds and hundreds of questions to ask. And I want to get into some of the nitty gritty now with you guys related to what it's going to look like when we get back. Once the CDC gives approvals that indicate it's safe to return to practice, what are some of the precautions that teams, do you think, Joel, could be thinking about now to ensure that it's safe for their membership to come back into the pool?
Yeah, so first of all, we're always going to default to local, state and federal regulations and how people handle this moving back region to region. And that being said, OSHA has now published a sort of return to work and sort of workplace safety among, within COVID-19. And obviously some states have more stringent requirements, and they'll be publishing their own back to work sort of guides. And so we're going to default to that. But what we're asking coaches right now to do, and our team services group is going to start meeting with small groups of coaches at the end of this week and going forward to do whiteboarding strategies on how to come back, is approach your facility. Work with your local health department on creating a plan about how you're going to come back, given whatever their limitations are, and how you would function. So pools are being closed because the image of a summer pool to a community is 300 to 500 people going to cool off, chairs right next to one another, people throwing volleyballs around and beach balls around in the pool, and that's probably not going to happen. But if we go to the facility and say, this is how we want to come back. We're going to alternate lanes with athletes. We're going to start at opposite ends. Whatever it happens to be that fits the numbers in your community. How do we limit contact as you move through a facility? How do we leave doors open so people aren't touching things? All of those little items that you need to game plan when you go through a facility plan to reopen. And quite, start small, go to a larger group, and have a plan for everything in between.
And that's an interesting point when you're talking about the session sizes. I've heard a lot of coaches get caught up in what are the session sizes going to be. Like, they're looking for an answer, right? Oh, is it going to be 24 kids in the pool? Is it going to be one kid per lane? And the reality is we don't know, right? So what needs to happen is we need to plan for a variety of scenarios. Is it okay to have 2 kids in a lane if it's 1 kid on each side of the pool? Is it possible to have 2 or 3 kids on each side of the pool if they're spaced 6 feet apart or something like that? And run the business models on that, because I know a lot of teams are then thinking, because the mind starts to race, right? Because they're thinking to themselves, well, if I can only fit a certain number of kids in the pool and I got to pay X amount of dollars for the pool, how am I going to be able to rent the pool with this few swimmers? So you run these different business models on the number of kids that you can get in the pool. You do your P&L on it. And then many of these teams have relationships with the facilities. So would you recommend perhaps sitting and meeting with the aquatics directors and going over the dollars and cents? Because I would think that they want their customers, the teams, to come back and be successful.
I think that's absolutely critical. We have people who are paying $140 an hour for pool rent, things like that. And if you've only got 10 to 12 athletes in the pool, you can't make that work. And so they're looking to reopen as well. Most of the facilities we're talking about have some connection to the community. They want to re-engage as well. As we just talked about, they're not going to have 300 people there for open swim, but they could open for teams who can actually contain the numbers, who can sit there and think, okay, we're only going to have 12, and they can manage it, and they can do it for 45 minutes, have 15 minutes of clearance to clean, and then bring in a new group. You might be warming up in the parking lot as an athlete, walking around the parking lot to get warmed up, because you'll go in for your 40-minute practice, and it's going to be, a no time wasted type of practice. Hey, coaches, make sure that, you got some patience with that too, because the kids are going to be trying to figure it out, and we're going to want to get our workouts done in 40 or 45 minutes, and we're going to want to rock and roll through it. And some days that's going to work, and some days it's not. So we're all going to have a little patience.
And there might be ways, and there could be ways to balance it. So you might have some kids, like you said, in the parking lot or the gymnasium doing some sort of workout, and then they can cycle through. They can come back through the pool. And I know that a lot of teams also have difficult relationships. Let's just be honest, with the facilities. It's hard, you're fighting for the pool space. There's other teams there, and it's possible that this could be a good time for people to get together and rally around the problem, and to have cooler heads prevail, and say, hey, look, let's serve our communities. Let's figure out the complexities related to pool space and run the different business models related to what could be available. And I think now is the time to start planning, because at some point, whether it's the end of May or sometime in June, gradually around the country, we're going to start seeing more and more facilities become available. And I think we would all hate to see teams caught back on their heels because they weren't ready with their ideas or their business models. I think now is the time to start running those business models and looking at what is possible.
Yeah, and I think that idea of coming together is pretty critical. And if you don't have a good relationship with the facility, now is the time to forge that. You know, I mean, it was, and I think too, we can't be unrealistic. There are going to be communities where pools will not open. Yeah. And so starting to think about what are some alternative facilities you could use as well. And I think we have some clubs that are entirely dependent on a county system for their pool use. And so how do you negotiate with a county about limited use when they've closed it to the public? I think having a conversation about the difference between being open publicly and being open for a specific part of the community, still serving your community. And that actually may cost more, because if they defray the cost of running those facilities through fees, so can you look at a way to manage that? Is that one of the ways that you use one of your SBA loans or some support from elsewhere? But I think people are going to have to figure out where they're going to invest the resources that they have. And for some people, that will look very different depending on the part of the country they're in and the type of pool that they use. Absolutely.
And you know, figuring out who you know who can help you and demonstrate those things that you were talking about, and demonstrating the difference between a controlled environment and a team versus, you know, just a regular, you know, rec session. You know, one of the things that you mentioned a little bit earlier, Joel, was, you know, running 10 hours of practice. Perhaps, you know, one of the teams that you're talking to is talking about 10 hours of practice, which I'm in full support of, and I think is valuable. And a lot of teams are considering longer days of practices, shorter sessions, you know, maybe practicing fewer times a week, so on and so forth. But I have seen a number of comments from coaches, many of whom I respect, that say, hey, look, I'm already working hard, very, very hard. Can I work any harder? And I want to direct this question over to Mel, actually, as an entrepreneur, as someone who's worked with a lot of coaches. What do you have to say to those coaches who are concerned about how much they have to work?
Thanks, David. I appreciate you throwing this one at me. Just, you know, opportunity to alienate coaches. Or
no, this is not about alienating coaches.
No, I know. I'm just teasing you, but it is a fair question. And I'm 51 years old. I've been around for a very long time, and coaches fall into a few camps. And some coaches are resilient, and they are just, you know, they're like titanium. No matter what happens, the worst things in the world can happen to them, and they just get up the next morning and they start walking and they act as if nothing had happened, and they keep doing what they're doing, and they're back to their process. And they live in their process, which is they live to make athletes better human beings, and more than just being faster swimmers. I didn't appreciate it as much when I was an athlete, but I certainly do now, because I look into many eyes and I see their faces, and I know them so well because they look stressed and they look 10 years older, but I know they're digging in at certain points in the season or certain points in their career. And I know that time doesn't matter. I know that they'll stand there on deck and stay up for 48 hours if they have to. I think that you have to be prepared to work more. And if you're asking yourself, am I working too much? I think you're in a tough spot. I think that you have to dig in like this is wartime. It is go time. We're working 12 to 16-hour days in our company. Most people would like to take a break. We're not taking a break. I don't take a break. My feeling is if you have a breath, take your breath. But when it's go time, you move. Some coaches fall into the camp where I do hear complaints, because I feel like oftentimes these coaches are they live a monk-like existence, and it's them alone on deck, and they don't have a lot of interaction with other folks. And I know how hard that is. I didn't choose that lifestyle, because my wife says, "Why don't you coach?" I'm like, "It's too difficult. That's too much of an investment. I know what that investment is, and you wouldn't like it. But but I do find that when I hear from those coaches and I hear more complaints than resilience, you see the results in the years to come. This is a moment where you're going to become great or not. And if I can bring it back to something that is a little more in my wheelhouse, when a moment like this happens and we see teams contracting or we see a defection rate, we're seeing a lot of it could be economic, but a lot of it is why I'm not fully invested in swim. I get excited because I do think that if we have the people in the commercial and marketing department at USA Swimming thinking this through and coming up with the media kit for the local markets like Joel was explaining, this is a moment to surge. This is a moment where you might not see the numbers. But if you dig into your local community and you show, I've got this dry land workout, maybe you're playing basketball or lacrosse or field hockey or tennis, but maybe you ought to be a part of our family. Or maybe it's mental health and you've seen your kids cooped up and now they're going to burst out of the doors. And I don't know about you guys, but if I had time on my hands, I was getting in trouble and the one saving grace was getting in the pool. I think if we can make that mental health argument that swimming, it produces happy chemicals. I think this is a time when you can really reach out and market and reach out to your community and say, hey, this is where you want to be. And this is what we're doing during this tough time. Come be a part of our family. You might not see the numbers now. When I market for SwimSwam or any other business that I have, I'm not looking for conversions and signups immediately. I celebrate every single one, but I am looking for it 6 months, 12 months, 18 months out. So let's think long term.
Yeah,
absolutely.
A huge piece of good advice there is the taking a breath. You're gonna be working hard. Taking a breath and thinking about things is really critical. I was super fortunate to coach for a large part of my career at the club, high school, and college level. And I approach my work like a coach, because I think most coaches are really entrepreneurial and they are willing to put in the work. But I think we're also very results oriented. And so it's critical to take that deep breath that Mel mentioned and just what does need to be done now versus what can wait, what is immediately important, and what am I doing that's effective and not effective, and taking a breath to assess those things is really critical. I do think that people will work themselves at the rate that is needed right now, especially if they want to survive. And listen, being on deck for 10 hours is hard, and you're going to need a break, and you need to build that in, because anybody who's been on deck for even 3 practices in a day knows that they're not as good at the end of that 3rd practice. They may not even be as good at the beginning of that 3rd practice or the end of the 2nd. So you've got to figure out a way that you're going to conserve your energy. And if you've got a small staff, how to conserve theirs. If you've got a big staff, maybe you've got a little bit easier time, but now you're managing a lot of other people and their different energy levels. But you've got to take care of yourself at this time. Right now, people are walking, people are getting out, people are spending time with their family, they're taking time to read. There are some healthy things that are occurring right now, and the things that are working for you right now to maintain your balance, even though you're in a stressful situation, if you can carry those into this hard work situation on the other side, those are going to be critical.
Yeah, absolutely. I took a walk right before this call. I need to get out. You mentioned something before that I felt was interesting, Joel, and I wanted to actually ask Tyler. You said that in the sport, and this is obvious, our athletes, coaches, very performance driven, results oriented. It's measurable times. Tyler, coming back into this new year, are we comparing apples to apples? Should we have the same expectations for December of 2020 as you had for December 2019, as we would have planned, or April, if you're an age group swimmer, or April of 2021 versus April, April 2020 is a bad example, but April 2019?
Yeah, so there are a couple of questions there, but to answer the first one, are we comparing apples to apples? In my opinion, I say no. Sure, I think everybody would love to get to the end of the season and be hitting best times, but I want to take everybody out of that mindset of just focusing on the time for just a second and consider a couple of different things. Okay, so if you look at a lot of the best athletes out there, the highest level athletes in the world, they get to a certain point in their career where hitting a best time is extremely difficult to do. Extremely difficult to do. So, and we already see this a lot within the national team, of there being a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety over trying to reach those goals again. And oftentimes you have to switch your perspective into something that's different. Like for example, with me, towards the end of my career, I swam during the 2009 the tech suit time, right? And some of those times I never reached ever again. And I had to refocus myself because, trying to reach some of those times may not have ever been possible for me. But what I started looking at was, okay, at the end of this season, this most recent season, would I consider myself a better athlete at the end of this season than I was before? Do I think that I was going through each season with more accuracy, more precision, and more diligence in my work than I was before? And if you focus in that way on those things, the time becomes a non-issue. And a lot of times because of that, the time starts to take care of itself. So I think that answers one aspect of the question, but something that I sort of prided myself on when I was training was that, I don't think, and this is probably a falsity, but I didn't think there was anyone out there that worked as hard as I did. I was willing to take myself to really dark, painful places in practice to get to the end of the season feeling like none of these other monkeys around me have worked as hard as I have, right? But just that thought process helped me understand, okay, everybody's going through the same thing. Like I understood everybody's working really, really hard. But all I have to do is find something that I'm doing just that much better. And if you do just that much better in something all the time, it's going to amount to something very large at the end of the season. So obviously right now, the grand majority of all swimmers out there can't really swim. Some people might be able to get into like a 5-meter pool or swim tethered or something like that. But for the most part, nobody's swimming like they used to, right? So it's the swimmers that are able to take this time and they're able to look at video, they're able to attend webinars, they're able to improve their core strength, they're able to improve their shoulder stability, they're able to do all of these things that not every swimmer out there is going to be doing, and they're going to come out of this period much more strongly than those who don't. And another kind of interesting thing is that Lee Summers is one of the people that we run our online workouts with, and he talks a lot about overuse. And we are a sport that overuses some very specific parts of our body, the fronts of our shoulders, for example. And I think it's really interesting, and honestly, it gives me a lot of hope to see how well people are going to do over the next 6 to 12 to 18 months, knowing that they've had this period to be able to let their body heal and recover. But that's only going to be the case if we make sure that as we transition back into swimming, that we don't overdo it. I think Joel was kind of getting at this earlier. We're not going to be able to get back to 9 workouts a week. We're not going to be able to get right back to 2-hour practices right off the bat. And I think that's a great thing, because while our bodies have been adjusting to quarantine, we're going to need to kind of ramp back up into sort of a normal style of training. And that, I think, is going to lend itself to some really interesting results down the road. So I guess to sum it up, no, I don't think it's an apples to apples comparison, but I think that the people who take this time and really break down what's going on and think to themselves, how can I be an entrepreneur with myself and with my performance? they're the ones who we're going to see on the national team, you know, in the next couple of years. And they're the ones that we're going to see on the Olympic team in 2024.
Yeah, let me add something to this. I love everything that Tyler just shared. Internally with friends and people that we work with here at SwimSwam and just my fellow swim nerds. I also, I'm an ambassador at the USA Swimming Foundation, and I'm always in communication with Olympians who have represented Team USA going back to 1952. Everyone's saying the same thing. They're like, wow, can you imagine who's going to come out of this period and experience a renaissance? Because there are swimmers who have injuries, and there are swimmers who are well aware of those injuries, and there are swimmers who don't know that they have injuries. They have tiny injuries that they're swimming through just because they're tough, because swimming is a tough sport. And so it's a guessing game as to, I wonder who's going to come out of this and be faster, better. I know that it might not always be realistic, but we are going to experience that in the future. And that's kind of an interesting outcome because of the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we talked about this just yesterday, David. You know, some of the best things that we have now have come from times of really great difficulty or come out of a need for something. And one of the businesses that most everybody knows of, Uber, came from the 2008 financial crash because all these taxi companies couldn't figure out how to get through it. And someone was like, well, I know how to solve that issue. So it's the swimmers that approach this like entrepreneurs and can figure this thing out. To Mel's point, they're going to be the ones that we're seeing at the top of the scoreboard.
Yes, absolutely. And the coaches and the team owners, exactly. That's what's going to happen. Two things that you mentioned, just for clarity purposes. There's, I'm sure there's a few parents on here of kids that are 12 and under. When we talk about 9 practices a week, we're talking about pros and NCAA practices. If you're coaching somewhere and you've got 14-year-olds and 13-year-olds and 12-year-olds, don't go be worrying. No one else is doing 9 practices.
That's a great point. That's a great point. But so when I was in high school, I actually only did 6 practices a week. I swam once a day until I left for college. So when I'm talking about 9 or 10 practices, that was when I was a pro, and that was my full-time job. So thank you for bringing that up.
And as a college coach, I only coached 6 workouts a week. Yeah.
I have to add something to this. It just came to mind, and I remember I'm a Marsh alum. I swam with David Marsh for a few summers, and he changed my stroke, even though I said, I'll never let you change my stroke. Greatest thing that ever happened in my life was working with him creatively. When his daughter was 13, she went a 103 in the 100-meter butterfly. She's now at Duke, but Alyssa Marsh. And she went 103, and I immediately fired off a text. What's going on? Is the Marsh family moving into the Olympic space? And he goes, no, that's not what it's about. For her, swimming is really about team and friends, and she only swims 3 days a week. And I was like, what? How does she? How do you go a 103 in a 100-meter butterfly when you're 13 years old? And he said that I said, are you coaching her? He goes, no, I don't coach my daughter. I'm not coaching my own kid. He said, it's just 2 things. He says she has great technique, made sure she had great technique, and she has an extremely strong core. And so when I think about the pandemic, when I think about this shutdown, I think, wow, what a great opportunity to think about your technique, but to strengthen your core.
Absolutely.
And those are big results.
Absolutely. And tied into all of this, guys, a lot of coaches have brought up, what's going to be the mental health of kids when they come back, to the sport, and the parents too. What are people thinking? What are coaches thinking? And Tyler, you were talking about it. You were talking about, should our expectations for December and April 2021 be the same? And you said no. Mel and I were talking yesterday, and I said, and the conversation was, what is the cause of mental stress? What's the cause of mental stress? And Mel, what did you say?
Well, I forgot what I said. I think the cause of mental stress is not knowing what the future holds and a lack of control. So what can you control?
And expectations.
And expectations. Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
And having unrealistic expectations.
It's all about expectations. It's all about expectations and attachment.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true.
You know, so if you go into the season, you know, thinking that you're behind someone else because you haven't been hitting the pool, as Tyler pointed out, and coaches and parents, you could be working with your kids too. Help them reevaluate the expectations. The times are going to be different. You work on the core, right? Work on other things. Find other measurables. Change your outlook. And I think that's going to help a lot with the mental health and the stress level associated with it. You know, there's a lot of questions that people had, and I want to, you know, get through things. You know, we talked about the size of practices and things like that. You know, it's going to be important for teams to communicate with their membership about, you know, the session sizes, why certain groups might have more sessions than other sessions. So again, getting back to communication, that's going to be a very, very important thing. There's also been a lot of questions about, you know, juniors and seniors in high school being able to put up good performances.
Yeah, it's a lot of stress around that. I mean, I think, you know, Mel mentioned Alyssa. She was having her best year as a college athlete. She was knocking it out of the park and getting ready to go to NCAAs. And I mean, I think all of us who know David and have followed Alyssa were pretty excited to see what she was going to do. So that's at the other end, but that's before the college side. I did a recruiting talk with Nashville Aquatic Club the other night, and it was really cool because in the beginning of the call, John Morris got on and talked to the parents and the athletes who were on the call to say, listen, this is going to look different this summer. Probably not going to rest at the end of the summer. We're not going to put pressure on you for times. Probably take a short break in August, really not much at all, and kind of ramp back up. But he took that pressure right off of everybody. And then we talked about on the recruiting side of things that, listen, we have coaches who are just, all they have to do right now is recruit. So they're all over it, those college coaches. We also have college coaches who are still trying to figure out how to get some of their athletes home who are stuck on campus, whose family members or their own family members may have been touched by COVID-19, and they're managing those types of things. So all bets are off in terms of what's normal for that recruiting side of things. But I can tell you right now, the best asset in the recruiting process for someone is the work that they've done, the story they've written with their coaches. So their club coach, their high school coach, whoever it may be, can have a conversation with a college coach about the athlete's real potential. So that story you've already written, that work you've already done, is the story that your coach can tell a college coach in this time when there may not be a time. So don't put pressure on yourself to hit the time. Listen, every college coach in the world is always looking for the kid who's going to improve and make them look good. So let your coach help you with that process as you move through that, and don't put pressure on yourself as a junior. Like, oh, I have to get a time. You don't.
That's so important, and that often gets overlooked so much. You know, I always get reminded of the Connor Yeager story. I don't know now if it's 6, 7, 8 years ago, but this is a guy who never even qualified for a national championship as a high school swimmer. And then he goes to the University of Michigan. The first year, I think he may have just made or just missed the conference championships. And then a year after that, he makes an Olympic team. You know, this is a guy who didn't even make, right? So, you know, there are other intangibles. They saw he's a sweet, remarkable, wonderful person with a terrific stroke, and that's what they saw in him. And I believe that those are the things that also people could be working on now. And also coaches might even be asking, hey, what have you been doing during the pandemic? You know, tell me about some of the creative things that you've been doing to stay in shape, to stay engaged, to keep yourself enriched. And those might be the things that they're looking at beyond just, hey, can you score points at NCAAs or at a conference meet? I want to go into the USA Swimming competition calendar real quick. You know, a lot of people are asking about that. Yeah. Is USA Swimming working on a number of different scenarios
We are. The one thing that we want to make clear is we do not plan on canceling the summer. We want the summer to go on. We are as hopeful as all of you on this call that we will have a summer season. But we're very pragmatic in terms of what that summer season will look like, and we want to take pressure off our athletes. We've been talking about the mental health side, and I think Tyler, talked about the pressure in terms of competing and getting that time. We want to take that out of the equation, quite honestly. So a couple of things that we're doing. We've offered our EAP plan for mental health to coaches across the country who don't have their own health insurance. We're also, Shayna and her team have been working with some of the providers in the online mental health space for our athletes. So we'll announce by Friday some discounts in that space for some of the app-based mental health and meditation for athletes. And then also some other resources that coaches and athletes can use going forward. And we should have that out by Friday. People have been working very hard to try to get those resources, but we know that a lot of the mental health aspect, as Mel said earlier, revolves around the uncertainty and to not lose pace. So we don't want to focus on championship events at the end of the summer. What we want to focus on is building potentially a series of events that will allow us to compete regionally and without Siri just. The Siri's thing just turned my Siri on. Now she's talking to me. I apologize. The goal is to make those competitions, in August, so that folks can have an opportunity to compete regionally, take some of the financial pressure off, the pressure and to compete in a championship meet, and thus get ready and go through the whole process of build up, rest, come down, compete, and have that pressure of a time that Tyler so eloquently talked about. What we want instead is to have a kickoff, like I said before, and move through into a fall that leads to a really successful summer of 2021. How that looks right now, I can't give you the exact specifics because there are many layers of all kinds of other meets that are scheduled. But we want to make sure that LSCs, local swim committees, for those who are unfamiliar with that term, the Potomac Valley you talked about earlier, have the ability to schedule meets that make sense for their community and that comply with those local, state, and federal rules about reemergence from this. So we want to give people as much flexibility at the local level by taking pressure off at the national level meets, the series of meets that we call championships right now, so that people can just get back to being on their club and competing to engage in their community, but not looking at putting tons of pressure on times or travel or expense.
Right. So there, obviously there could be a number of different scenarios that happen with meets. We're hopeful that, some larger meets, like you pointed out, regionally can happen. And I imagine that you might be talking about, are you talking about younger age groups too, or are you talking about mostly older age groups?
Yeah, I think the focus would be sort of that sectional level athlete and above for those regional meets, all the way up to our national team athletes who will be looking to get back in the pool and compete, which could make for some really fun regional competition. I think below that, below those ages, once again, stay local. It's talk about the pressure earlier. One of the greatest things you can do to take pressure off kids as a parent is just expect that they do their best and that they have fun. Any conversation about times from a parent, it has a very different connotation than it does with a coach. And there are great ways to set expectations in your family about giving it your best and making sure that you're the kid that's working the hardest and having the most fun at practice. But beyond that, once again, good opportunity to take pressure off kids and give them the gift of just letting them enjoy the sport.
So I want to ask you about that. So when it comes to like the LSC, so it sounds like you're looking for LSCs to, and perhaps even the teams themselves to arrange for meets. And we don't know what the CDC is going to allow. Let's just face it, right? Like it might be very small sessions. You might have to have, sessions with, literally like one age at a time. You don't know. There might have to be all sorts of different ways to limit the number of people on deck. Now, when you think about it, I'm just thinking about the business models, honestly, and the time and the way this thing puts together. There might be scenarios where you can't do every single race. You might have to have very long days, very long, weekends, or during the summer, fortunately, people might have more time during the week. And then I start to think about officials. Right. So if there's lots of small meets going on, and teams are running their own meets, let's say dual meets and things like that, and there's several going on simultaneously, there's only a certain number of officials who can participate in those endeavors, right? You got a starter, you got the meet official, you got your lane judges and everything else. So there's going to be a shortage potentially of officials. Have we thought about during this period of relaxing what is necessary from an official standpoint? You know, so even if times that are posted at an age group level, at least the kids can post the time. There's an electronic timer, you know, whatever's going on from that standpoint. And if the times have to be asterisked or whatever else, but you know, have you put any thought to this? Because I know that that's a concern that's been mentioned, and there are people who even, and let's be honest, who dig their feet in the ground and are like, this is the way it's going to be. There's got to be this many officials. This is what it takes to have a sanctioned meet, and we can't relax things. How do we address something like that?
It's a great question. So we have looked at it. And one thing I'll say is that for a dual meet, it only takes 3 officials. So if you're going to run a dual meet or you're going to run a time trial at your own pool for your athletes, it only takes 3 officials. So that's within our rules right now. And we are really hopeful that people run series of small meets when they're allowed. I mean, I think there's a unique opportunity here, and I actually want Mel to talk about this in a minute when I explain sort of what we're doing with the officials, but to run meets differently and to do things in a way that is gonna, you can do a series of small meets and make more money than you can off of 2 giant meets and not tax your parents. But I'm gonna reserve that for Mel, because I know he's got some thoughts on it. But we are working with our officials committee on some virtual training to make sure that we can get officials up and ready to go when this is out. That committee is also and Rules and Regs is also very aware of the fact we may be running a very different type of meet when this is all over. And so preparing for that, we had already talked, before we went into this, we had talked about making some uniformity across the country in terms of officiating and some of the requirements. So we're moving towards that anyway. This will speed that process up.
Under the leadership of USA Swimming, if a meet is official and there's some creativity allowed, I just want everyone to know that you could be an unknown club team in a far-flung state, and you run this meet. We're going to cover this meet, and I can tell you that everyone's going to tune in. 500,000 people are going to look at the results of your meet. They're going to be following it. That's something that's exciting. I just know that there's a lot of pent-up demand. We can feel it on our side, because everyone is latching on to any shred of hope or anything that's forward-looking. But the idea of clubs running dual meets is very exciting. I also think this builds a lot of team cohesion in a way that we you know, I haven't experienced since the 1970s.
No, that's exciting. You know, one of the, and I love that these ideas are already being talked about and discussed, and for those that aren't part of those conversations, you know, I hope it gets your mind thinking about what you could be doing in your parts of the country, and create that co-opetition that we were talking about earlier. I have another question. One of the concerns was the issue of fairness at the higher level. You know, there might be certain parts of the country, because we might be going, you know, different parts of the country might be opening up at different points. They might close down again at other points. You know, we might see a resurgence of the virus, whatever it might be. There's an issue, or at least it's been talked about, and I just want to get it out in the open, about fairness. Like, what if California shut down or New York is shut down, but yet in, you know, the Southeast they're able to compete? Have you thought about any of these things?
Yeah. This is why I don't sleep much. You know, the reality is we want clubs to start up and get going as soon as they're able and it's safe, right? Competition is such a back burner, you know, side of things, and that's, I think, where the change is, that's the really difficult part, right? So our board is working in 45-day windows to address the 30 days at a time. So we stopped all sanctions and revoked all sanctions through April 30th. We're now in that period where we're 15 days out from that next 30-day window. So the board is working on thinking about that. The advice that our sport development group brings to the table in that conversation is that we would like to keep everybody on as even a footing as we can and not open up sanctions in different areas of the country. And that's for a few reasons. One is the fairness element, but we also don't want to incentivize bad decision making. So, oh my gosh, there's a meet, 600 miles from me. I'm going to go to that meet. Well, that's not what we're looking for right now. We have to play our role in this whole public health, effort together. And so that's just not something right now that's culturally acceptable for us as a sport, or as a community. So, we're going to look at it as how do we keep it as balanced as possible. Now, if we get to the point where there are only a couple of places that are closed, what is the cost benefit, right? So we'll address that as we get closer. Right now, it looks like we're going to face a lot of the similar things across the country. There's some, obviously there's some hot spots, but there are also places that are ramping up, some places that feel like they're past peak. But many of the governors are making very similar decisions about reopening times. Some may accelerate it, but we're going to go for the what looks like the sort of the healthy main chunk of folks.
Well, that's a smart thing to do, and I think from the sounds of it, something that everybody should keep in the back of their mind is that, hey, we might be open for a while, and then there might be a small period of time in the fall when we have to close again. But we got to keep our eye on the ball and remember what's important for our age group swimmers, are those who are looking to go to college and swim, and then those looking to go to trials and just navigate the issues that we have there. One of the questions I had that someone had was, will the current age group time standards that are set to expire this year, will they be extended?
Yeah, so time standards are really interesting, obviously, because they're time sensitive and they do expire. So I can't answer to exactly what we'll do with each set of time standards, especially for each set of meets, because the circumstance is different. So, for instance, the U.S. Open this fall in December may look very different than it did last year, the right path towards the 21 Olympic trials. But when you back it up and you start looking at, say, our national select camps, we ran a scenario yesterday where we changed the dates of qualifying for that to see what would happen, because we know that a lot of the athletes may not be able to compete in the normal time frame for selection for those events, and we know how important those are for athletes as they're making their way sort of up the pyramid. So we will be looking at all of that. We have some great folks, who take into some deep calculus on this. Patrick Murphy, if you've ever met Patrick, swam at Notre Dame. His brother's a decent swimmer, and Patrick is our analytics guru, at USA Swimming, and he's thinking about this a ton along with Larry Herr, and we've got some really cool people thinking about what does this look like, and they're combining it with our folks who run events, and everybody's coming together around making sure that we provide opportunity, but then also making sure that we keep our events the right size as well.
Good. A lot of teams take a break in August. Sounds like you're suggesting that they swim right through it and go right into short course, right? Make most of the time we can get.
Yeah, this is our summer break. This is our end of summer break right now. We're taking that break now. We're getting that rejuvenation right now, and we move through August. And interestingly, talking to a couple of coaches this week, they're talking about taking a short break in December that they don't normally take, kind of move through, get a good body of work, maybe compete in December if that happens, and then taking a little break around the holidays that they've never gotten to do, and then ramp back up for the summer, which I think is a cool idea. I think people are adjusting on the fly, and I personally, if I was still, coaching the club team that I was fortunate enough to coach for about 9 or 10 years, I probably would, if people want to take a weekend off, or they want to take a week off in August, I'm not going to put pressure on them, but I would keep my program going all the way through August.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about funding and some of the other business issues that teams have, and get some of your suggestions. And I appreciate you guys have already been on the call with us here for about an hour and 15 minutes. I appreciate the time, and we're covering a lot of really important stuff. So, thank you. A lot of programs and facilities are not able to host meets right now. It was encouraging when you said earlier, hey, you might be able to run some smaller meets and make money, because a lot of teams count on meets to fund their teams. and also a number of teams also run swim lesson programs that they aren't able to have to fund their teams. And the PPP that's out there from the the SBA loans, they only go so far. And people have concerns about membership. Does USA Swimming have anything in place to support teams that relied so heavily on swim meets, swim lessons, and things like that to help them reinvent themselves? I know a lot of people have even talked about, hey, can USA Swimming help with some dues or things like that? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we have a great relationship, I think, with most of our LSCs, and decades ago we went to our LSCs and said, listen, you need to build up a reserve fund so that when we get to the rainy day, the LSCs can support the clubs within the LSCs. The LSCs derive the meet fees and the splash fees, et cetera. They have some of their own fees that are charged into addition to the USA Swimming membership fee. And that culture has been built up over years to have those reserve funds. Well, here's the rainy day. So those LSCs that have been able to do that right now are developing efforts to provide financial support to their clubs or business support to their clubs by using their buying power to, for instance, purchase additional insurance, create opportunities within the LSC for business development for their clubs. But we recognize that not every LSC was able to do that, and not every LSC has enough funding to support all their teams. So right now we are working on a plan to provide financial support to those clubs and those LSCs that are not going to have access to some of those funds. But in order for us all to make sure that we protect all 3,000 clubs, it's going to take a combined effort between the LSCs and USA Swimming to do that. With 3,000 clubs, you can imagine many of those clubs have done a good job of taking care of themselves, but several, as you mentioned, are reliant on that cash flow of those different types of business operations. And we want to be able to help, and especially if there's a time to stop some bleeding before they get those PPP loans or they have another SBA EIDL loan or something along those lines that may be coming. If we can help in that process, we look forward to doing so. We have a lot of things that we have to go through as a national governing body operating across 50 states to manage that. But I can tell you that it is underway, and we're looking forward to announcing that hopefully later this week and getting those dollars rolling out to clubs through an application process that will be somewhat similar to our previous efforts around disaster relief. But in the meantime, we're also trying to provide quite a bit of business services to our coaches as well. So we're going to provide access to One America, doing personal financial support for our coaches, taking them through some counseling just about their own personal finances. We're also trying to find people in our LSCs who can provide business guidance to our clubs as well. But we do feel like some of our coaches could use some financial resource support right now in terms of thinking about their own finances. We're also trying to make sure that those clubs can stay active. So as the content that you're providing and working to get to clubs and say, hey, this might be a model where you could continue to collect dues and stay engaged with your athletes. We're providing that webinar content as well. We went out to our insurance company who initially said, no, you can't do remote dry land via Zoom and things like that. We went and worked with Steve Levine, who's brand new, George Ward, who just left, who was our risk management senior director and he retired, and Steve Levine's come in. But their first joint thing together as they were overlapping their time at USA Swimming was to go back to our insurance provider and ask for the ability to run those remote workouts and be covered by our USA Swimming insurance. So we pushed that out to the clubs, and it may not be the ideal and perfect solution for everybody, but it certainly was better than what was going on, which was nothing. Some LSCs have decided to invest in enhancing that insurance, and we think that's a great use of some of those reserve funds as well. So it's going to have to be a partnership. Yeah. We're going to have to work together on this.
Yeah, absolutely. And along the same lines, a lot of teams, have the disappointment of, hey, look, this was the Olympic year. I was hoping for a little bit of a boost. And then it's compounded by the fact that, summer is also a time when many teams around the country they leverage the excitement of summer league for recruitment to bring in the new 7, 8, 9, 10, 11-year-olds into the sport. And there's a concern that, some summer leagues may not be able to happen. I've had a lot of conversations with teams and other influencers around the country on how to ensure that it happens. I think it's very important for USA Swimming clubs to make sure that summer leagues happen, and to think differently about what a summer league can look like. You know, for example, you know, maybe it's a shorter season. Maybe you're having 2 A meets a week. You're finding other ways to consolidate championships and stuff like that. Have you thought at all about, you know, I guess it's a 2-part question. You got the summer league part, and then, you know, we talked a little bit earlier, can this time now be used to bring new people in the sport?
Yeah, I mean, I think we touched on it a little bit earlier in terms of, you know, making sure that we have the marketing support. But you're right, in many areas of the country, one of the primary entry points into our USA swimming teams is through summer league, and getting excited about the sport in that way. In other parts of the country, it's that first experience on a high school team when you're in middle school that brings kids to the sport. So yeah, we have a huge interest in making sure that summer league in high school happen. The challenge with summer league, of course, is that it is pretty disparate. You know, it doesn't operate around the entire country, and everywhere it does operate, it's a little bit different. We have had some good conversations with a few people who run larger summer league programs, and we want to partner with them. Right now, to be honest, though, my focus is so much more on our existing members and clubs. But yes, a club that has time to think about, hey, how can we partner with the summer league to make sure it happens this summer, is probably a club that's going to do quite well on the other side of this.
Absolutely. And they need to, and things they need to be thinking about is, you know, a lot of them are run by volunteers. Are the lifeguards getting trained? Right now is about the time that the lifeguards would be getting trained to open up those pools. You want to make sure that those companies that are training the lifeguards are thinking in advance, thinking now about recruitment and when that recruitment might, you know, when the training might actually happen. And it may not be on a firm date, but you get the recruits in and you say to them, hey, look, your training may happen anytime between May 15th and June 15th. God willing, the pool might open, right? And to find other ways to make, you know, ensure that. And the same thing with the pool companies and things like that. Plan for the various scenarios.
Yeah, the Red Cross and a few of the other you know, lifeguard training company or organizations that do certification do have some blended learning. And if I was running a pool, you know, I'd make sure that those lifeguards were going through that blended part, the online part, so that when you could do the in-person training, you just get right to it. I mean, it's you know, if I knew who my lifeguards were and I was advertising, and I know that a lot, as you mentioned, a lot of the summer pools have already hired their lifeguards. I would do that blended training now, get them ready for that, and then they can come back in and do the in-person elements of their certification at that time.
Absolutely. A question I had was, is USA Swimming considering leveraging the new Flex membership? This is from Jimmy Parmenter in Omaha, Nebraska. He wanted me to mention his name. Would USA Swimming consider leveraging the new Flex membership structure for everyone in 2021?
No, I don't think we would leverage it for everyone. I mean, I think we still find a tremendous amount of value in our full premium membership. You know, I think that Flex has provided in some areas a really good way to bring in those pre-competitive athletes, to combine their lesson athletes, their athletes in lesson programs, and their athletes on their team to do some work together. There's a lot of great benefits to the use of Flex, certainly. But, you know, our goal is that Flex should be an entry to the sport, and then, you know, you move into that premium full membership and are competing on a regular basis. You know, Flex only allows for 2 competitive experiences, and we hope that we're not just training to train. You know, we hope that part of the fun of the sport is competing, and once again, this is an opportunity for us to get better at making new and exciting meets and getting families involved that way. So, well, I think that people can use Flex certainly to bring their athletes back, especially if there's limited competition over the summer. I really would love to see Flex as that entry point, and then people move into, hey, I want to compete a lot, you know, because I love the sport.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. You know, USA Swimming, like other many successful businesses, you have a value, and successful teams, you have a value proposition, and you have a customer base that you're serving. And you're providing a service, and you know, that makes total sense. That you should, I 100% agree. another question that would USA Swimming ever consider providing affordable health insurance as a group for coaches? Is that an option?
Yeah, we've looked at that numerous times and going across state lines, and we're not an employer, and of the coaches.
So that's the issue, right?
Yeah, and so there's, quite honestly, I don't want to get too political, but our governmental leaders can't seem to find both their backside with both hands on this issue. So I think it's a little bit difficult for us to wrap ourselves around it as well. In a perfect world, of course, we'd love to do that, but it's when you really get into it and examine the issue, it's just not possible as a non-employer. There are some unique allowances and some carve-outs for association type healthcare. But if you've ever met somebody who has one of those plans and pays money for that, I don't know, you find out when you get to a point where you're hospitalized that plan is only worth what you paid into it. And if you've been paying $600 a month for 2 years, you're not going to cover much of your insurance. So I think that there are other ways people can find insurance. We certainly would love to find a better solution for that for coaches. We do talk about it all the time. It's something that George Ward, who I mentioned earlier, spent a lot of time working on. I imagine Steve will continue to query insurance companies on a regular basis about that. We do talk to insurance companies and other NGBs about this topic all the time. There's no elegant solution in our current healthcare system.
Right. Now, this is a question, and thank you for that. Now, this is a question that breaks my heart, honestly. And I understand it. I've had I've been in a situation before with my company years ago where, we were fighting for survival and trying to figure things out. So I understand the perspective. I was talking to a team in the Midwest a few weeks ago, and they told me that they had found out that they would not be able to use their primary training facilities for 6 months. Basically all the way through the summer. So it's now all the way through the summer. And they're very, they had spent the last couple of years building their team. They're up close to 200 swimmers now, and they're very concerned about going out of business. What, if any, role does USA Swimming have with a team like that?
I would say to that team to contact our team services group right away, and we'll start working with them. So B. Hansen at usaswimming.org or Tia Vicious at usaswimming.org will be your first person to start with, and then whatever we need to do to help, we will certainly do that. But I think that's the first step, and we can start taking you through scenarios and ways that we can potentially help. But yeah, that's why we want to talk to every single club to find out what we can do to help. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Well, guys, this pretty much thank you for spending an hour and a half on this call. Is there anything else that you guys would like? Tyler, do you want to open up the chat to see if anybody has questions? Joel, is there anything? Mel, is there anything you guys want to say as we close out?
I've been sitting here sending people the link. Hey, Mel, how do we get on this thing? But my question was about Summer League, and you covered Summer League, and I something that really matters to me. And right now, it's like we live in a community of 6,000 homes, and our Summer League is very robust down here in South Austin. And I knew a lot of folks were going to tune in for that, so I appreciate you guys addressing that. It's and what's interesting is that we're honest guests, but we didn't really have that full answer from Joel on the Summer League calendar, and which is absolutely tentative, and we don't know what's going to happen. But it was good to hear from him. So I feel like this was time well spent.
Yeah, Mel, we actually have a question for you from David McDonald. He asks, is there anything you can share about your current thoughts on rescheduling the zone select camps that were going to take place over Memorial Day weekend?
Are you sure that question's for me, or that sounds like a Joel question?
It says specifically Mel, but either you can answer.
Yeah, that would be a USA Swimming endeavor, and that is run out of our sport development department, but in partnership with the zones and the LSCs. So right now we're looking at rescheduled camps. As you know, it'll be difficult facility-wise. At a minimum, we're looking at some virtual opportunities to get together and have some of our national team athletes do some of the traditional talks that they do with those athletes and do some virtual work. So we are thinking about that. Finding time and facilities to host is going to be our most significant challenge. But yes, we're looking at ways that we can provide that same experience or push it into the coming year.
Here's a question that I've seen come up a number of times. This one's from Dave Gibson. He asked, if we're able to do meets in the summer, would you recommend short course or long course?
Recommend whatever you think is gonna work. I mean, I would love it for our end of, for sort of the getting rid of the end of the season championships and replace with a fun series at this, in the August timeframe. I would like those to be long course. I think it sets us up well for going after 2021. But the flexibility to host what you need to host to have fun and get the sport going again is really, I think, the critical piece. And if you've got short course water and then run short course meets.
Yeah.
We got long course water, run long course meets.
Yeah.
Yeah. I see another question from Jennifer Bannister regarding, will you be able to reschedule your fitter and faster clinics that have been canceled this summer? We postponed 80 camps between mid-March through the end of May so far. And we are working with every single host to reschedule every single one of those events. I would say about 80% of them already have new dates. And it's really been overwhelming, the support that we've gotten from the people who have signed up. They're all looking forward to give their kids something to look forward to. They're all excited to give their kids something to look forward to. So we're really happy about that. We have a camp that's also scheduled in Omaha that takes place during the 8 days of Omaha. And we had sold a lot of registrations for that. And everybody is excited about that and has switched their registrations to 2021. So, we're in a very, very fortunate position.
Okay, great question to answer. I also got another question from somebody about giveaways on our webinars. So you can enter in a giveaway for a gift card. Everybody that's still here, if you go to our most recent, so I'll show it to you, and this is for one of our upcoming webinars. It's called Breaking Down Front Starts. If you go to that post on Instagram and you type in hashtag FFT Live, that will enter you in the competition. We'll select 2 random people from those comments to get a free gift card.
Awesome. Here's a question that might be that's interesting from Karen Orcutt. Joel, if they do host summer long course age group zones at any chance or something like that, will the 14-year-olds that lose their short course zones be able to go to long course zones?
It's a really good question. I think what we're trying to do right now is create this end of season, for the sectional level above, and then move the rest of the competitions to the LSC and local level. There's a chance, of course, that zone competition could take place, but I think that's highly speculative at the moment. And we have age groups for a reason, and we have sort of time frames of qualification for competition that is. Gosh, I'm not answering this question very well. I apologize, but we're trying to create opportunities just to get back to local competition, and I have a hard time answering a question about zone competition that I don't know what that's going to look like at this time. I apologize. Right.
There's another question that came up. It looks like it came up after we had this discussion from Kristen McPhail. She said 14 and under athletes have had a number of meets canceled, and she talked about losing their excitement. Kristen, rewatch the video. We covered that a lot, and we have other webinars. There's a lot of other things to keep kids engaged with the sport and excited about the sport. I live in a household with an 11-year-old who had his JOs canceled, and he missed some last opportunities. And we've talked to many hundreds of other people in similar situations, and there's ways to work through that. And I understand the concern, but it's definitely not the priority during a pandemic. And there's other things that we can focus on that are enriching as it relates to swimming. Well, thank you guys. I just appreciate the time. You know, maybe something else comes up in the next couple of weeks we could talk about. You know, I enjoyed speaking with you both, with you all, and it's been an hour and a half. So I appreciate everybody who's stuck around with us, and I just want to thank everybody who's worked with us over the last several weeks. And actually, would you mind? This is going to be like the Academy Awards. Over the last 3 days, I've spoke with about 40 different coaches and texted an email with 40 different coaches who helped me prepare for this. So can I just read off the names of a bunch of different people? Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So Susan Haslip in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, Mike Murray in Victor, New York, Jimmy Parmenter in Omaha, Nebraska, Brian Botsman in Columbus, Ohio, Erica Meyer in Houston, Texas, Doug Buckaloo in Houston, Texas, Denise Croucher in Portland, Oregon, Ross Hedrick in New Orleans, Louisiana, Dan and Paris Jacobs with Machine in DC, Eric Richardson in Fargo, North Dakota, Dan Mascola in Spartansburg, South Carolina. Thank you guys. Robert Fletcher in Albuquerque, New Mexico, Andy Beggs in Columbus, Georgia, Julie Bachman with Gulf Swimming, who's doing a great job with leadership. I know she's in touch with USA Swimming a lot, going through the issues with clubs there, taking on a big-time leadership role. Jonathan Kaplan in Richmond, Virginia, Hillary Yeager in Annapolis, Maryland, Todd Schmitz in Denver, Colorado, Terry Fritsch in Charlotte, North Carolina, Corey Hildebrand in Irvine, California, Carl Koziski in Greenville, South Carolina, Chris Davis in Atlanta, Georgia. He and I were texting a little bit today. He's looking forward to getting out of isolation. John Ifey in Kingsport, Georgia. Shane Ryan, he actually was the first clinic that we had to postpone back in March. Shane Ryan in Madison, Wisconsin. Jen Beach in Temecula, California. Amy Schmidt in Fulshire, Texas. Ben Chung in Burlingame, California. Charles Lurch and Pete Barry in Pittsburgh. These are all people I've talked to in the last 3 days. Charles Lurch and Pete Barry in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Alexis Keto in Winnetka, Illinois. I saw you send me a text a few minutes ago. I didn't read it, though. I'm sorry. Joey Waldorf in Western Springs, Illinois. Raz Kupenko in St. Louis, Missouri. Doug Warham in Nashville, Tennessee. Britta Wyatt in Eugene, Oregon. Tom Ugast in D.C. Jason Schmelzer in San Antonio. I'm sorry, man. This is you play the music. I got 4 more. Jason Schmelzer in San Antonio, Texas. Stephanie Bass in El Paso, Texas. Peter Holcraft in Voorhees, New Jersey. Brandon Converse in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I know I forgot a lot of people, and maybe that was over the top mentioning people, but I'm just appreciative. I know I forgot people, but I'm just appreciative of the relationships that we have, the relationships that we've established. And I love how the community is really getting together during this time, and how we're all really rallying together. And I love you all. I love swimming, and I want everybody to be successful and come out of this thing whole. And I appreciate you guys for joining me. Thank you.
Yeah, and so and I want to echo that to everybody who's joined us today. Thank you very much for coming on and being with us. You know, all we're trying to do is give back and keep people engaged here, and see as much turnout for this one webinar has been amazing. Mel, thank you very much for being here. I want to make sure that both you and Joel know to hopefully go back to your respective organizations and talk to people about what we're doing, because we want people from the swimming industry to come on and talk to people that are here. Like everybody's craving this engagement, and they want to hear from people in the know about what's going on, what to do, what to look forward to, and just kind of that positive message that we can all sort of hold on to as this time goes on. So Joel, thank you very much for your time as well. Everybody that's here, if you want to, you guys are going to be, go ahead, David.
I'm sorry, Tyler. I just got a text from Mel. He told me that Tim Hinchy tuned in. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I really don't want to promote anything, so I don't know if that's where you could go into this. You know, I'm just happy that everybody tuned in, and thank you for coming out. And I hope this was very helpful. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Everybody that signed up for this, you guys are going to get a link to the replay video if you want to go back and watch anything. Other than that, thanks, everybody. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Bye. Thank you, guys.